Great Watertown was being restored, and all the engines were working hard to rebuild it. Hector was excited to take part of it. Even Spencer's visit was enough to keep Dennis away. All the engines were determined to restore Thomas's discovery. One day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds. "Great Watertown has finally reached the end of its construction," he boomed. All the engines were very happy. "However," continued Sir Topham Hatt, "there is still one project that needs to be done as soon as possible." The engines listened. "A great big water fountain has been disposed of years ago, and some clients of mine had offered me another one to replace the old one. Since Emily is out helping Salty at the docks, and Bill and Ben are with Derek and Stanley at Great Watertown, I need 2 engines to take that water fountain to Great Watertown." James had hoped he'd be chosen. He liked being given special jobs. "Please, sir," he chuffed. "May I take it?" Sir Topham Hatt chuckled. "I like your determination, James," he said, "but the water fountain is too heavy for you to pull alone, so Edward shall be your back engine." Edward was very pleased, but James was not. "What do I need Edward for?" he thought to himself. "He's just an old fusspot." "James," thought Thomas, "you know you can't keep thoughts to yourself. Edward is more reliable than you'll ever think of him." "Quite," agreed Henry. "He saved you from becoming out of control yourself." James snorted indignantly. By the time they arrived at the yards, Diesel 10 was already there, loading the water fountain onto James and Edward's flatbed. But the work took a long time. Edward was patient, but James was too busy making a fuss about it. "Hurry up, you giant metal clanker," he huffed. Diesel 10 became infuriated. "Now you listen here, you red apple," he snapped. "Don't be insulting me any further, or I'll—" "Now don't you even think about hurting James," interrupted Edward. "We have a very important job to do." Diesel 10 was taken aback and set his claw aside. James laughed as he puffed away. Soon the 2 engines were steaming through the beautiful countryside. "What a beautiful day! What a beautiful day!" James chanted. "Nothing can ruin this day." And he started to puff even faster. Soon Edward became worried. "James, maybe we should slow down." But James suddenly lost his temper. "You know what the problem is?" he snapped. "You, Edward of all engines, seem to care more about going slow than hurrying to complete your job on time. Sir Topham Hatt relies on us to be on time, and you of all engines dawdle, so I don't see why he should keep you along his railway." Edward looked down at his buffers. He hadn't expected James to shout at him like that. "There now," comforted his driver. "James didn't mean it like that. He's sometimes too vain for his own good." "Too right," chuckled Edward. Soon they came across the other side of Gordon's Hill, and Edward prepared to slow down. James, however, thought otherwise. "Keep going," he shouted, and he began to biff Edward and the flatbed. Edward was surprised. "We have to be on time," shouted James as they puffed up the hill. "Keep your pace, James," shouted his driver. "The hill's too steep." But James was so crossed about Edward, he didn't hear him. As they reached up the hill, James suddenly bumped the flatbed once more. And then there was trouble. James's driver had suddenly lost control. And they ran down the hill as fast as their wheels could carry them. "Slow down," whistled Edward. James applied his brakes, but it was too late. As they reached the downhill, James stopped all of a sudden, accidentally bumping the flatbed. With a loud snap, the water fountain fell to the rails. Then, with a mighty crash, James and Edward gasped. The water fountain was in pieces. "Flatten my funnel," gasped Edward. "Look what you have done," cried James crossly. "That wasn't me. You stopped all of a sudden," retorted Edward. "And you didn't stop when I told you to." James, hearing everything he said, looked down at his buffers in shame. He knew that somehow Edward was right. Soon, Harvey and Stanley arrived with the breakdown train. They've arrived to help clear up the mess. And aboard Stanley's cab was none other than Sir Topham Hatt. "James and Edward," he boomed. "What has happened here?" James now felt sorry for Edward. "Please, sir," he spoke up. "Edward isn't to blame. It was my fault." And he explained what he had said to Edward. Sir Topham Hatt was very disappointed. "Once Harvey and Stanley clear up this mess," he said, "you, James, shall be Edward's back engine and collect a new water fountain. Maybe that'll teach you to say he is no use to our railway." And James said nothing else. Soon, the workmen had installed another water fountain on their flatbed, and they were on their way. This time, James listened to everything Edward had said. "Red signal," he called. James, seeing this, stopped carefully, as Edward had told him. "Thank you, James." James just smiled. Soon the water fountain had reached Great Watertown, and all the engines were there to celebrate it. Then James whispered something to Edward. "I'm sorry I said those horrid things to you, Edward," he said sadly. "You really are a good friend." "Thank you, James," said Edward kindly. "It's nice to know we have each other's backs." "And we engines must pull together, whatever happens," agreed James. Edward could only agree.